listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. 4:43. This is the Zach Gelb Show right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. We're going to put the NBA talk on the back burner for just a bit. I understand the excitement with the NBA draft still being fresh in your mind, and also the award show coming up later tonight. Although I think that's ridiculous. 14 days after the NBA Finals ended, and now it's the award show. Like, couldn't we just give out the awards? And I understand how everyone wants to have an award show. And I didn't love the NHL award show and the expansion draft. I just thought that was terrible television. Just send out a release. I know everyone wants to make money and they put a who's of celebrity in a room, but just send out a piece of paper, a release. We don't have to make it so sexy. And just tell us who won the MVP, who won the Rookie of the Year, and all that. But now let's talk a little pucks, as it was a big weekend. He sure goes number 1 overall to the Devils. Nolan Patrick goes 2 to the Flyers. Rangers make a trade, a big trade, and the Islanders were also very active as well. So let's bring on a college classmate of mine, and also someone that's well on his way to becoming a great hockey broadcaster, and that is Mike Zahn, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now to give us all you need to know about everyone that was drafted and also the trades that did happen. Mike, appreciate a few minutes. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Zach?
I'm doing great. We appreciate you coming on. So first, let's start with the Devils. They went Hischier instead of Patrick. Give me the thought process by Shero on that one.
I think Nico Hischier is the kind of player who can transcend an organization, and he didn't have the injuries that a Nolan Patrick had. Nolan Patrick entered the year as the perennial number 1 selection, and he was in a lot of pre-draft, even mid-draft rankings as the number 1 guy. But Nico Hischier with the Halifax Mooseheads, a team I know you love in the QMJHL, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League.
That always cracks me up when you get the Mooseheads. You're right.
Yeah, he really found a way to go from 15 in the mid rankings to number 1 by the end of the year, and I just think that Ray Shero wants to make sure he hits a home run, because if you look at the New Jersey Devils, while it wasn't always under Shero, they've actually started to acquire some number 1 overall picks. Think about last offseason, they get Taylor Hall, and then a few years back, they get Ilya Kovalchuk, the 2001 first overall pick. So they want to make sure they hit a home run, and a guy who hasn't had any injuries, they get that in a Nico Hischier.
Okay, now let's get a little bit on Nolan Patrick. Just describe his game to me and what type of player the Flyers are getting.
I think you're getting a guy who is a 200-foot centerman, and by that I mean he will play all ends of the ice. You can probably slot him in your second line in, make it 2-3 years. He'll probably start off, if he makes the team, and that is an if he makes the team out of camp this year, he will probably be on the third line just so that he can get adjusted to the minutes. And we saw a guy like Travis Konechny, a guy who was a 2015 first-rounder. It took him a little bit of time to get acclimated to the NHL game. And you know what? You have to keep in mind, this is an 18-year-old. He is 6'3". He has the body frame of a man, but being 18 years old, it's going to take him a little bit of time to adjust. So here he is. He probably will find himself in a bottom 6 role. Maybe by the middle or tail end of the season, he'll find himself in Sean Couturier's spot on that second line. But Nolan Patrick is a guy that these Flyers fans should be very excited for the long haul.
I know you just touched on it a little bit, but give me a little bit more on the chances both these guys will make the opening night roster in October.
Well, I think the New Jersey Devils are a team that are just dying for forward depth and need someone to come in to excite the fan base as well. So Nico Hischier, I think, is more or less a lock. It's not a guarantee, and I know that sounds silly when we think about Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid going first overall, but you know what? Nico Hischier needs to polish up his game a bit. I expect him to be on the opening night roster for the New Jersey Devils, and I do expect Nolan Patrick. It's a little up in the air. Some people would say, oh, are you out of your mind? He should totally be on it. Or some people would say, you know what, he was nursing an injury. Maybe send him back to the Western Hockey League. My general opinion is Nolan Patrick will find himself slotted in the bottom 6, but he will make the opening night roster.
We know, as we're just talking, and you brought it up, McDavid and Matthews, these two guys, they're not going to be those two players. And, you know, that's definitely the bar right now when you look at hockey with guys playing in their first few seasons, just how exceptional McDavid has been and what you saw out of Matthews last year. From a point perspective, when these guys and Hischier and Patrick both hit their primes, what can we expect from a point standpoint? What do you think their statistics will look at when they're playing at their best?
Well, So you said the bar is being set with McDavid and Matthews, and just to be a little fair, that's a hard bar to be set.
It's impossible to match it.
Yeah, we just saw a Connor McDavid in his first full season. I know it was his second NHL season, but in his first full season,
stupid good.
He leads the NHL in points, and Connor McDavid is going to be the face of this league. But when Nico Hischier and Nolan Patrick finally are in their primes, we'll say in their mid-20s, so maybe 5-6 years down the line, these are guys that probably will be 70, 80-point guys. I think that Nico Hischier will probably be a slightly better goal scorer on just the pure shot. And you know what? Patrick Laine, who went second overall last year, he has a better shot than Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews just scored more because in tight he's a little craftier, but Laine has a better shot. So Nico Hischier likely will score more goals. I'll go in that 30, low 30 neighborhood, and probably for a Nolan Patrick, I'll go high 20s, maybe also low 30s. He may have one or two, maybe even 3 30-goal seasons in him. But these are guys who are going to be facilitators of the puck. They'll find ways to make their teammates and everyone around them better. So I expect these guys to also be in that neighborhood of 40 to 45 assists. So these are 70 to 80-point guys at their prime.
Hockey broadcaster Mike Zahn with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. The Braden Shen trade, give me your reaction to that.
Well, Braden Shen right now has 3 years left on his deal with a $5.1 million cap hit, and you never want to see a good player go, and these are the tough decisions that general managers need to make. And I think that it also goes to show that not only is Ron Hextall just trying to maybe free up some cap space. Granted, he does take on Yuri Laterra's contract, who he has 2 years left with $4.7 million cap hit, so you're only saving $400,000, but you are getting an extra year of cap space that you wouldn't have had with Braden Shen. So I think that Ron Hextall is looking at his team, and he has belief that in the future, now that he's drafted a Nolan Patrick, now that he sees what a Travis Konechny can be, when you look at the defense, he might need to start putting some more money. You saw he just gave Shane Gostisbehere a contract. He's going to start to have to give Samuel Morin and Travis Sanheim, Robert Haig, maybe even down the line he's going to have to give up Philip Myers a contract. So there's a lot of pieces moving around, and I just think this gives Ron Hextall a little bit more flexibility. And you know what? He still got a first-round pick out of it. You have to keep in mind, Nolan Patrick goes too, but they also get a late first-rounder in Frost, so not too bad, in my opinion, by Ron Hextall.
What happens with the goalie situation this upcoming year for the Flyers, Mike?
They need a backup goalie, and there are some talk that, hey, maybe Steve Mason comes back. I'm not thinking it's too likely. Hextall hasn't ruled it out, but I'm not thinking it's too likely. And the general sense is that their coveted goalie, Anthony Stolarz, who had a couple call-ups, and he finally gets in this final call-up. He finds some action in the NHL. It's maybe not time just yet for him to take the reins, because what he was doing in the AHL wasn't as impressive as what he was doing in the NHL when he had that extended time, and he's also coming off of an injury. So the Flyers may look to free agency just to bridge the gap a little bit. A name that might be thrown out there is a Jonathan Bernier, who has played second fiddle to guys like James Reimer and Jonathan Quick, as well as last year he taught a young John Gibson in Anaheim what it was like to be a goalie and go through that routine. So I think Jonathan Bernier. We've also seen the name Brian Elliott thrown out there, even though his name is now being more closely tied to Winnipeg.
All right, let's head up the Turnpike. We'll stay in the Metropolitan Division. The New York Rangers, we know that they wanted to trade Derek Stepan. They do that over the weekend. A little bit surprised with the age of Lundqvist that they also trade Ronta just because he was a very nice piece for them this past season, but they got a whole lot in return. How about what the Rangers did over the weekend?
Well, it was a fun weekend for the New York Rangers, that's for sure. I don't think a lot of people thought that Derek Stepan and Antti Raanta were going to be packaged in a deal. They get a first-round pick, and not only a first-round pick, but they get a top 10 pick. The first time the New York Rangers are picking in the top 10 since 2010 when they drafted Dylan McIlrath. So 2017 to 2010, there were no top 10 picks for the Rangers. So they think they have something now, and you have to keep in mind, this is a team that hasn't even picked in the first round since 2012 when they drafted Brady Shea. So that was a pretty good first-round pick for them. So they're going to have to find a way to now get a center that replaces Derek Stepan's minutes. They're going to need to find a way to replace Oscar Lindberg's minutes. Can they find a way to re-sign a Brendan Smith on defense? They're going to have to give an upgrade to Mika Zibanejad, Jesper Fast. They have right now $20 million in cap space, and that could turn into $23 million if Kevin Kline does opt to retire. But you know what? Before you know it, you sign a piece here, you sign a piece there, and before you know it, $20 million will dwindle down very quick.
Where does Shattenkirk play next year, Mike?
if I had to guess, it's between Boston and New York, and right now New York has that advantage that they have all that cap space. I'm going to guess that the New York Rangers do end up. It's somewhat of a homecoming for Kevin Shattenkirk, but I do think they're going to have to pay a hefty price. You saw what T.J. Oshie just signed for, signing 8 years for $46 million with the Washington Capitals, and some believe that was maybe even a hometown discount. So I think Shattenkirk is not going to give necessarily as much of a hometown discount, but I do think he will be a New York Ranger come next season.
Were you surprised that Oshie goes back to the Capitals? Because a lot of people, from what I just heard, they were expecting him to depart the Capitals.
Yeah, I think it's more surprising that the Capitals decided to sign him 8 years. I understand that they feel, hey, we have a guy who scored 30-plus goals last year, and he didn't even play the entire season. He didn't even play 70 games, T.J. Oshie, as he was nursing some injuries. So I think the 8 years is really with the hope that they get another 3-4 strong years out of the American out of War Road, Minnesota in a T.J. Oshie, and they're also hoping that since the contract is front-loaded, then maybe he's expendable by year 34, 35 when his contract is a little bit easier for another team to absorb in the hopes that they maybe feel they need a T.J. Oshie at 35 years old if that event were to happen.
What else do the Capitals need to do to get over the hump? Is it just
a
mental thing at this point?
It is the hardest thing to understand in the NHL right now because on paper they should be contending better than the Pittsburgh Penguins. They really should be better than the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, they should have 2 cups by now with how they play in the regular season.
And they've tried to add piece after piece. They've switched even coach after coach. They have a Vezina Trophy-winning goalie. They have an all-star, one of the best scorers of his time in an Alex Ovechkin. Frankly, it doesn't make sense, but they're just going to keep going at it. They bring back Oshie. Justin Williams is 50-50 about coming back. They are letting Carl Alsner walk, and it's pretty clear Kevin Shattenkirk's walking as well. But they're going to try and hold this nucleus together just as long as they can and add a piece here or there, and they're just going to hope they bring it together. Right now, it's an anomaly why they haven't won a Stanley Cup.
Islanders were wheeling and dealing. How do you evaluate what they did with the draft process?
Well, right now the New York Islanders are in a position where starting July 1st, they can re-sign their franchise centerpiece in John Tavares. And there's been some talk that if they don't make him happy, he's not going to re-sign and he's going to play out his full last year of his team-friendly $5.5 million deal. And that doesn't make a lot of Islanders fans happy. So they're trying to get some forward depth, and they bring in Jordan Eberle, who statistically speaking is better than Ryan Strome, as well as is a closer friend of John Tavares. The two of them grew up together and as well as were strong teammates together in the World Juniors back in 2009. The two combined for almost 30 points in the tournament. So right now, Garth Snow, I think his job is a little bit, he's on the hot seat potentially, so he's just trying to do everything he can. He reacquired some of the picks that he had to give up in the expansion draft to make sure that George McPhee and the Vegas Golden Knights didn't touch a lot of his other pieces, and he got those picks back when he traded Travis Hamonic to the Calgary Flames. But as it stands right now, I believe the New York Islanders are a worse team than they were last year. They still have assets, and there's still time, but they're in a little bit of a murky situation in Brooklyn.
With that being said, and minus the fact that it was the team that drafted him, John Tavares, why would he stay there then?
I think the main reason to stay is who can give him the twofold. He wants to win, and he wants money. Let's be honest. Right now, the New York Islanders aren't in a position to win, so that's an X against them. So Garth Snow has to do everything he can to win. Something he can do, and something he will do everything in his power to do, is give him the money he wants. A lot of teams that are building right now are putting their pieces together, and they're starting to say, for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs, well, we have Austin Matthews, well, we have William Nylander, well, we have Kasperi Kapanen. You can go up and down that forward depth. It was speculated that maybe Toronto would make a play on him. Doesn't seem all likely. I think they found their guy in that number 34, Austin Matthews. So right now, John Tavares is in a position where he dictates what he wants to do. Does he want money? Does he want winning? Does he want both? Right now, it's not looking too good for the Islanders if they want to hold on to John Tavares, albeit talks seem good, but we're a year out from his contract ending, so no reason for him to rush into saying, well, I don't want to re-sign with the New York Islanders, but a lot of work to be done in Brooklyn if they want to hold on to number 91.
Mike Zahn, before we let you run, Mark Recchi does get into the Hall of Fame. Took a little bit longer than some did expect, but just reflect a little bit to me about the career of one Mark Recchi.
So Mark Recchi is a player who, while it took him some time, the most amazing thing that Mark Recchi did that I'm a little surprised it took him as long as it did for him to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame is this is a player who won not only 3 Stanley Cups with 3 different teams, but in 3 different decades. He wins a Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 90s. He wins a Stanley Cup in his 1 year in Carolina with the Carolina Hurricanes in the mid-2000s. And then his final year in 2011, he hoists the Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins, the first time that original 6 franchise had hoisted the Stanley Cup since the Bobby Orr days. So over 1,500 games played, over 1,500 points. Mark Recchi is one of the best. Some reason, or what many would speculate as one of the reasons why he wasn't in sooner is because, well, he played on all those different Stanley Cup teams, so he got to play with Jagr and Lemieux during their prime, and he got to play with a Patrice Bergeron in Boston. He gets to play when he was in Carolina with an Eric Stahl, and even his Philadelphia days, as many of the listeners would remember, he's playing with Eric Lindros, John LeClair. So people think he was a product of his teammates, but you know what? The numbers back it up, and it's a well-deserved Hall of Fame honor for Mark Recchi.
Hey, I have to ask you, as last one with Mike Zahn, so we did college radio together at WHIP at Temple. How much do you miss me, Mike?
Zach, every day I miss going into those WHIP studios and having all our fun debates. It's always fun.
There was some hesitation in your voice, I heard at first.
Well, I didn't know where that conversation was going.
Okay, yeah. There's a lot of things we won't talk about on the air. Mike, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Of course. Keep up the good work, Zach.